himself, Ryan Chetiyawardana.
Hello. If any of you have seen me speak, you know that I don't really like to talk about our venues too much. I prefer to talk about some of the things that everybody's actually hinted at, the idea of the why behind. I think it's much more interesting that it's a case study rather than it's kind of, this is specifically what we do, and particularly in relation to this topic. But also, we like to keep our cards quite close, so I apologize. I'm not going to actually reveal anything about Lioness. But it seemed very fitting. You know, this is 10 years of the world's 50 best bars. And as an anniversary, this is actually the point where I first started talking about this subject matter. So the idea of sustainability has been something that's just kind of been very curious for us for a while. And we've started to try and find ways of incorporating it into our business. It's kind of one of the pillars of what excites us. And so I wanted to talk about one of the things that I've seen as a bit of a barrier to this topic. And there is a bit of doom and gloom that surrounds this subject. It's not necessarily the sexiest thing to talk about, but in the kind of fact of talking to a load of kind of bar operators and people from the industry, it actually kind of seemed fun to talk about what we see as a real positive that we've had come out of this, and it's the idea of creativity from it. So I'm going to focus on that, and in the limited time I have, try and rattle through something that I usually talk for about an hour about. So before I click through some pictures, I want you to form in your head a vision of what you think about when you hear the word sustainability. You know, most people conjure up a certain idea, and these ideas restrict us. So the language we use, the terminology around it, the definitions we form around a subject kind of encase us in something. And I think one of the bad things about sustainability is it's really seen this ugly term. And you know, in the bar world, people saw it as this weird contradiction. When I first started talking about it, people were like, well, we're a luxury industry. We don't really go together with sustainability. And I think this is one of the things that's really held the topic back. You know, the idea of drinking out of jam jars does not turn me on. It's really uncomfortable and it's not fun. It doesn't match the luxury of what we're trying to do. But that, to me, is not what this subject is about. So one of the things I kind of implore you to do is, you know, everybody needs to start thinking about this topic in one way or another. And the starting point to me is trying to kind of move beyond those ideas that you initially think about. So to me, the wonderful world we live in nowadays is about the amazing comforts that we've worked so hard to kind of bring into our world. And for this subject to become more universal, it's really crucial that it doesn't then sacrifice all those things. It's not about throwing it all away. So there's some pictures up on the slide. You have, you know, I don't eat a ton of meat, but I do eat meat. I love tropical fruits. I don't want to give up having those, even though none of them grow in any way in the UK. I'm here in New York. I travel quite a lot. It's the wonderful thing about our industry is you do get to kind of go to different parts of the world and learn and explore and be inspired. I don't want to give those things up, and tequila. I don't want to lose that. And on the right is my picture of my cat, Batman. He is a luxury, and I don't want to also give up those things. There's going to be quite a few cats in this. So words evolve, topics evolve, ideas evolve, and we remain quite static to them, or we become kind of fixated on some of those aspects. And I think, you know, within seasonality, that there's been a few that have really kind of hemmed us in. One is the idea that we've fixated on waste. So, you know, as children, you learn about the kind of process, and waste is the final one. You know, you talk to reduce, to reuse, and finally to recycle. And it's very odd to me that we've become so fixated on this, and it's not to say that waste isn't an important thing for us to think about, but it's also not the whole story. You know, there is, you know, my business partner has done amazing work. Check out Trash Tiki. There's a lot of resources on there for how you can explore how to reuse your waste and think differently on those things. But one of the ones that I kept seeing come up in the world of food and drink around sustainability was the pillars of how locality, seasonality, and foraging were so crucial to a sustainable practice. And of course, they're parts of the conversation. You know that if you pick some local ingredients and you have them at the peak of their season, they're going to taste great. Like it's one of the wonderful things about nature is it kind of guides us to delicious. But it's not the full story. There are local things that we have that are done by terrible practitioners. There's also the fact that, again, in a realistic world, you're not going to get this good fight if people can't have a martini or a tequila shipped from the other side of the world, or they can't have their cup of coffee. It's not about having to sacrifice those things. There are people who are in different parts of the world who are doing really wonderful stuff. And in a modern, connected world, we can't just discount those stuff. Same with seasonality. Again, wonderful. It tells us about the peak of things. We work in booze. Like, our whole world is on the idea of preservation. We transport things into different mediums that cheats time. We don't have to just be restricted to this idea. And actually, those definitions can really help us lose sight of what we can do to make a big difference. And the final one with foraging, yes, of course, there is kind of ethical foraging, but it's wild food, and it's great that it's taught us about biodiversity. It's taught us about the fact that there are lots of other delicious things that we can use, and we don't have to rely on the fallbacks that we've used for so long. But it's also, if everybody adopted it, we would ravage the world. If we took all wild things, and actually this made me a bit terrified about seafood, having seen some of this stuff, but it's not the focus point that we should only restrict ourselves to. So to me, the exciting thing, it's one of my favorite pictures. You got Pikachu on acid. And it's to reflect the fact that we are drawn to certain things. We are drawn to food and sex and water and sleep because they keep us alive. And in the same way that we kind of end up falling into very easy definitions. And, I'm going to kind of challenge a few of the points that others have raised in this. And I think innovation is super crucial. And that, to me, is not about losing traditions. It's not about saying, I totally agree, the daiquiri is probably the best drink that anybody's going to make. But innovation should come in different forms as well, and challenging the foundations of our industry and those systems that we've put in that generate waste are part of the ways that we're going to overcome these things. It's one of the most exciting things to me when I talk about this subject, or we give some of the whys or the tools behind it, is seeing what other people do as a result with those ideas. And as an industry, trying to shift ourselves and trying to go, we don't need to lose the wonderful things that we have. The heart of it, yes, our industry is about making people happy. It's bringing people together, and the wonderful ways food and drink help people have a great time. But that doesn't mean it can't coexist with the idea of us doing things in a way that's conscientious. And it doesn't mean that we're going to totally devastate the planet on the other side of it. So trying to shake up these definitions, to me, is the way that we're going to build this into a more balanced future of it. And what's our approach to that? So I think this is just as a motivation, I think, is a useful idea, is to blow shit up, is to challenge the way things have been rigidly formed into our industries. And it's not just our industry. So, I've put a picture up, a guy there called Douglas McMaster. Again, I'm biased. I work with him very closely. But he was the first person to have a true zero-waste restaurant. And of course, zero waste doesn't exist as a real term. It's not possible. But what he did was, he spent his time in 2- and 3-star kitchens, worked on fantastical foods, but he showed that you didn't need to then generate a load of waste from it. And he did that by changing the whole systems around it. And it's been a real eye-opener for us. A lot of those things are when this first manifested for us in White Lion, our first bar, and we tried to challenge the way that we bought booze, the way that we made ingredients, the way that we put together a drink. Why did we have to rely on ice or citrus? And that wasn't to challenge those as being good or bad. It was to say, why have we looked at those as the only foundation on which we can create things? And so the idea that I want to give to people behind this is to give a shit. It's great that there are so many different ways that we will overcome the problems that we're facing. We're an industry of super creative people. That's the thing that's really wonderful about it. It's a real band of misfits that have come from so many different backgrounds. And the ability to problem solve the things we have around us is all there. The world can feed lots of people. It's not the issue of the kind of resource availability. It's the way we start to process it. And the thing that we found the most success with is teaching our team to actually give a shit about it, point out some of those things that they can do. And the wonderful kind of result of some of that stuff is, yes, we feel good about some of the things that we've been able to change, and by no means are we perfect, but it's been incredible to see what's come out of the other side of it. If I give my team an amazing fruit or an incredible spirit or other delicious things that we have around us, of course they're going to come up with delicious drinks. Like, it's a given. You know, they're very talented at doing that. And they can fall back on those kind of classics that we all know are timeless and they can use as formulae. But all of a sudden, if they're faced with something that they have to use 2 or 3 times, not use the primary use. I drink a shit ton of tea, so they've got to use the tea leaves to try and find a way of kind of extracting the tannins or whatever it is from it. As a result, we come up with really amazing new endeavors, and it just reprograms our team to think outside the box. So I'm going to leave you on my favorite slide that goes into any of the thing. I told you there'd be another cat. All of the talks that any of us from Team Lion do. And I can't really ask you what you think this is, but it's a cat with a golden gun, riding a unicorn, breathing fire through a rainbow. And there's nothing more beautifully ridiculous than that to sum up the internet to me. And the internet to me is mankind's greatest invention. It's the sum of all human knowledge in one place with lots of availability to those resources. So we reach out to people, we try and find ways of pushing these ideas forward, and it's really helped us grow as a creative company. And to me, it's the most exciting thing that I'm seeing in the industry at the moment is this optimism around how each of us are sharing and trying to push all this stuff forward. It's really challenging what I see as the boundaries of what we do as an industry and what we can do to overcome these problems. Thank you very much.